couple of years ago, the BMW 1250 GS was one of the hottest selling motorcycles in the Philippines. And in fact, at one point, the GS outsold any other BMW vehicle, including the cars. It seemed like everybody wanted their end-game motorcycle. And then the competition stepped up. Other sport tours and ADVs entered the Philippine market to challenge the once undisputed king. And that's why BMW needed to do something different, something new, to reclaim what was once theirs. And can you improve on the 1250? Well, in my opinion, yes, you can. Because this right here, the 1300 GS, is better in every single way than the previous generation. Allow me to tell you why in this episode of Beyond the Ride. So let's talk about the aesthetics first. When this bike first popped up online and the press photos were released, a lot of people reacted. Some said it was ugly, some said it looked Japanese, but in my opinion, I don't get why that's an insult, because some of the best looking motorcycles out there are from the land of the rising sun. But this, I think, looks much better than the 1250. In fact, if you watch our old video of the 1250 GS, I actually said that's one of the things I didn't like about the bike. But I think this looks more modern. I think they kind of trimmed out the fat from the 1250. It looks a little bit sleeker. It's a little bit more angular. It's a little bit more aggressive. I just appreciate the way this bike looks more than the 1250. And again, you know, looks is something that's a little subjective, but in my opinion, the bike looks infinitely better than the 1250. And yes, I even do like the headlight. So let's talk about the power. The R1300 GS is packing an all-new 1300cc liquid-cooled boxer twin engine, which is more compact, lighter, and puts out 145 horsepower at 7,750 RPM. That's 12 more than the 1250 GS. But it's not just about the numbers. The engine feels more alive, it's smooth, and it's torquey. But what really is amazing for me is that BMW managed to shed 12 kilograms from the previous generation. At 237 kilograms wet, it's noticeably lighter, which makes a massive difference when you're riding off-road and enjoying some spirited riding on the twisties. And you can even feel it when you're sitting in Manila traffic. So let's talk about the tech. I mean, this bike is absolutely loaded with it, and it's actually smarter than some humans. The TFT display is one of the best in the game. In fact, it's absolutely massive. It's crisp, intuitive, and packed with features like smartphone connectivity, navigation, and they also included radar-based adaptive cruise control, which some other adventure bikes have already. But for the purposes of this bike, which is to ride far, it's a welcome addition. So obviously it has a whole lot of riding modes. You get rain, you get road, you get dynamic pro, which is a lot of fun. Now for all the off-roaders out there, the bike also does have enduro mode, but it is locked right now for this bike, and I do believe you have to pay in order to unlock that or find a way to be able to activate that. But it does have it in the menu, it's just not activated for the bike. So just like the other BMWs, you still have the wheel to control where you want to go on the screen, and it's pretty much, it looks the same, it pretty much feels the same, but I think that screen is a little bit bigger than the old one. And the tech just does not stop there. I mean, it has a center stand assist, so when you put the center stand down, the bike will help you lift it up. It's still kind of heavy, but it does that. For the top box, if you notice, it actually moves slightly here and left to the right. So if you're cornering, it actually helps you so that you're in better balance. It's not tipping with you, but it's a nice addition. It's a very, I never even thought that this would be something that I would want on a bike, but hey, it makes sense. So it also does have adapted ride height. I mean, I'll measure the seat height in just a bit. So when you're moving, the bike's a little bit higher, and when you come to a stop, it does lower a little bit. So for all the shorter riders out there, it's actually very manageable. And the weight is still low, so it's not something, even though the bike is pretty heavy, It's not something that's top heavy like some of the other ADVs out there. So you'll be able to manage this bike a whole lot more if you're not used to bikes that are still pretty high and this big and heavy. It's got a redesigned frame. It's now more compact and rigid, which means better handling on both the road and off-road. So another nice touch of the bike is that you have a windscreen that you can adjust by a push of a button. You don't have to turn a knob or lift something up. You can just press a button and it goes up. And you can also bring it down. Pretty cool. So the seat height can be anywhere between 870 millimeters and 850 millimeters. I'm 5'6" with a 764 millimeter inseam. And that is what it looks like. If I put this up, you can actually adjust the ride height. As I mentioned a while ago, there is an auto mode, so when you come to a stop, the bike does lower a little bit, but you can also do it manually. Let's start the bike first. I don't know if you can see that, but it is getting a little bit higher. And then you can bring it down as well. I haven't felt that boxer shimmy in quite some time, but so as expected, the seating position is comfortable with a commanding presence. It feels very similar to other ADVs and tours. I do feel like the bike is a lot more agile and it feels quicker and more responsive than the previous generation. And that was really my biggest complaint about the old bike. As great as it was, it was something that I felt that BMW made it so good that they over-engineered it. It almost felt like a massive scooter at times, just how comfortable it was and how easy it was to ride. It almost didn't feel like, I was riding a motorcycle, but it was so advanced, it was so good that I guess that's the reason why this bike, they decided to make it feel like you're riding a motorcycle once again. Because it does bring back some of the sensation. Yes, it's extremely comfortable, which is a great thing. In fact, on the awful conditions of the roads here in the Philippines, I barely feel any of the bumps, especially on road mode. However, when you switch to Dynamic Pro, well, it becomes something special. The suspension stiffens up a little bit, it gets rid of some of that squishiness, and it gives you an extremely sporty ride, and it becomes really, really enjoyable. Now, yes, it may not have the same road presence as the previous model because it is slimmer, but I don't mind. I don't mind that it's actually, it's not as, look at me, it's not as commanding in that sense as the previous generation GS. This is kind of a little bit more subdued in that sense, but I think it still actually looks a lot better. As I said a while ago, it's almost as if they got a bodybuilder and slimmed him down a little bit, and I appreciate that about this bike. At slow speeds, the bike feels at home, something that the previous generation also did very well. You can crawl it if you need to, if you're on some trails, or maybe if you're sitting in Manila traffic, and it's happy to do that. And then, when you open her up, she's happy to do that as well. Now, the stopping power is excellent, and depending on how fast you're riding, if you use the front brakes, the bike will also use some of the rear brake, even if you don't step on it, which the older model also had. Now, if you're riding slow, the bike can detect that, and it won't activate the rear brake if you use the front. It really makes riding so much easier, so much so that it corrects a lot of your errors, just like the previous generation GS. It makes average riders better when they're riding the GS. It almost like it corrects a lot of the mistakes that you do or that you make. And I guess when you jump on another bike and you're coming from this one, then you'll realize how much more difficult it is. But with this bike, it really helps you along the way. You know, this bike is extremely smooth, it's refined, it's quick, and you've got all the torque that you'll ever need. And the quick shifter makes gear changes really seamless, except when you're at the low speeds. If you're going from first gear to second gear, the quick shifter is a little jerky, but once you get faster, when you're at speed, when you're higher in the rev range, it becomes really smooth. You know, it's the kind of bike that makes long rides feel like a breeze, and at the same time, it's an absolute blast to throw into corners. For the off-roaders out there, I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to enjoy it as well. And the lighter frame, the advanced electronics make it so much easier to handle, especially in tricky conditions. Okay, so let's talk about the competition. The obvious one that people will compare this to would be the Ducati Multistrada V4. Even though I think the XR would be more in competition of the MTS. But for the sake of this video, let's compare it to the Multistrada V4. Now, the MTS is still more of a performance tourer, although the fuel consumption of that bike is laughable. This is more of a relaxed tourer with some off-road capability and can still give you some of the thrill when you decide to do some spirited riding. It actually might be more versatile than my bike in that sense, with of course better fuel consumption as well. Now, I haven't tried the new version of the MTS V4 just yet, so I'm comparing a bike that is about 3 years older than this one. So maybe with the new, it's not a fair comparison. It's not an apples to apples comparison. So I have to be able to test out the new MTS and this GS, this version of the GS, to really find out something, you know, the improvements of the Ducati. But for now, I can say that this BMW 1300 GS is really significantly better than the previous generation. I've really enjoyed this bike for the time that I've had it, which has been almost for a week already. And I've gotten some pretty long rides. I've ridden it in the city. I've gone on very, very light off-road areas. I've taken it on some twisties, and the bike is very enjoyable. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a couple of years, maybe you've seen the video when I compared the Multistrada and the GS with Cat Kirov. And in that video, I kept on saying that as good as the GS is, I found it a little bit on the boring side. But you know what? I think BMW Motorrad watched that video and said, you know what, Gino's correct. He is right. We need to make this bike a little bit better, a little bit more spirited, a little bit more exciting. And they did it. So yeah, to the BMW customers out there, you're welcome. So, is it worth it to upgrade if you already have the 1250 GS? Well, in my opinion, yes. The bike is different. I mean, this right here is faster, it's lighter, it's got more tech. It, in my opinion, looks better. And it rides better than the previous generation. And that says a lot because the GS has been the benchmark for many for such a long period of time. And this right here, it's just, well, it's a generational leap from the previous generation. And I think it's something that you will enjoy if you decide to try riding the bike. And the looks, if you weren't sold on the looks in the beginning, I think it can grow on you. At a starting price tag of $1,675,000 for the base model, and for the option 719, which is this one right here, you can have it for 1,855,000 Philippine pesos. Now, if you have extra cash and if you belong to the 1%, it's a bike that I would definitely consider. For more information about this bike and other MCs out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. I'm Gene Orfino. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Ride.